Okay, a warning, this story has very strong language, it has violence, and the story is immediately distressing. This is one of the craziest I might have ever looked at, and it gets rough. It's not gory, but it is rough. This is because you think you're the fucking hero. This is because you are willing to let a pretty girl die. This is because you have no respect for the Brazilians. You would rather she dies than lose face. I will shoot again. And this is because you police officers, you pigs, want to fuck around with me. Well, I'm not fucking around with her. She will be dead next. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Thank you if you got in touch about last week's, the midweek episode, the Cliff Young story. People seem to really like it, so that's good. Two things to mention quickly and then I'll get on with the story. First thing to mention is that there's a thing called the British Podcast Awards. And there's been a lot of support online this week to get Extraordinary Stories Podcast nominated in the Listener's Choice category. It would be lovely if you could vote for Extraordinary Stories Podcast in that category. Obviously, I mean, I'm never going to win up against all these big boys, all these big guys that have networks behind them and have all these people. I'm just a wee independent podcast. But still, nice to know that people would like to see a nomination. So if you've got a second, you can just go on the website, look for Listener's Choice and put in Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Okay, the second thing, and this is a lot of conversation coming from people who listen, and I really, really do appreciate this. It was started really by Clara Mayer on Facebook, and it's a conversation around me taking the podcast live. Clara was kind enough to offer a venue, and from that it kind of snowballed and there was a lot of conversation. Lots of people were offering to help and saying that you would love to come and see Extraordinary Stories Podcast live, and now here is the thing. I will in the future do Extraordinary Stories Podcast live, but not right now. Because there's a lot I need to plan. There's a lot I need to get right. I have a very clear idea of what I would want Extraordinary Stories Podcast Live to look like and to feel like, and what I want those live events to be, and I just need a bit of time to just get that right. But I promise it will happen, and you'll be the first to know when I announce live shows. I promise. Alright, Barry, get on with it. Okay, the story. Are you ready? This one is nuts. Okay, let's go. Okay, so this story takes place in Rio de Janeiro, and it's the year 2000. Now, in Rio de Janeiro, like anywhere in the world, there's poverty, there's huge wealth in other parts of it, but in the areas where there is poverty, it is real poverty. There is very little help from the government for those who are poor. And it's a horrible, horrible life if you're someone who doesn't have a home, or you don't have a family, or you don't have a support network around you. There are thousands upon thousands of street kids. And these street kids don't have anything else except each other and whatever they can find to rely on and to try and survive. So in the year 2000, police officers in Rio de Janeiro, they get an emergency call. There's a situation happening in the middle of a major city. The police officer asks for more information, and he's told that there is a public city bus and it's surrounded by people, and that there is a potentially dangerous situation going on inside the bus. The bus has come to an entire stop because a mugger has entered the bus and was demanding money from the passengers. He'd entered the bus and demanded that everybody empty their bags, their purses, and their wallets. So who was this man? Well, he was Sandro de Nascimento. Now, I don't know that I've said that correctly, but Sandra Rose de Nascimento. That's how I'm translating it for myself. I'm not sure it's entirely right, but hopefully it's close. We're just going to call him Sandro. You won't have to go through the pain of of hearing me trying to pronounce his surname. So why was Sandro here this day on this bus, mugging people, taking their money, taking their belongings? Sandro had been born in Rio de Janeiro to parents who were heavy drug users. 1978 he was born. His birth, well, it wasn't born of a marriage of love. It was born of a one-night fuck between his mother and a man that she had met. So Sandro had no idea who his father was. This man had gotten Sandro's mother pregnant and then vanished. What a prick. So Sandro was living alone with his mother in a tiny apartment. A really small and pretty disgusting place. Sandro's mother, unfortunately, she had issues with drugs and alcohol. And she'd gotten herself to a place where it was spiralling out of control. Financially, she just couldn't afford the house that they lived in, and she started to dabble with prostitution. And she was in deep now with drug dealers. She owed money to people, money that she couldn't pay. One night, Sandro and his mother are in their tiny home. He's just a very young boy. And 4 men arrive at the door. Now, it wasn't unusual that a group of 4 or 5 men would arrive at the door. This happened quite often. And what would happen was Sandro's mother would bring them in. They would go into her bedroom and, a huge big fuck session would begin. During which times I think she would be treated in the most horrible, horrible ways. And Sandro would be in the next room listening to this while his mum was next door. So while they're living like this, a group of guys arriving at the door, it's not really big news for Sandro because it's just become a way of life. Now one night there's a knock on the door, and it's polite to start with. But then all of a sudden 4 men burst through the door and they grab Sandro's mother. Who are these men? Well, they're dealers that she hadn't paid for drugs. Drugs that she'd taken and had never paid for. And in the living room, while the 6-year-old Sandro watches, she's killed by these men. The first is a knife through her chest. The second is her throat is cut. The men throw her down onto the floor. Quite sure she's dead, they leave the apartment. Fuck me. 6-year-old Sandro at this point is standing in the living room with his mother's dead body. So he stays there and he stares for a long, long time at his mum. After time passes, he leaves and he goes to get his neighbour. He knocks the door, but he gets no answer. He tries another neighbour, but again, the same, no answer. He goes out into the street and he finds an elderly man and he tries to explain what has happened. It's really confusing. He isn't saying it properly. He's upset. He's not being clear. But the old man, God bless this man, he follows Sandro upstairs and he sees the dead and bloody body of Sandro's mother. Police are called and Sandro is taken into care. So this happened at 6 years old. Now 2 years later, oh, are you joking? Are you fucking kidding me on? 2 years later, he's kicked out of care. At 8 years old. 8! What the fuck? He's kicked out into the streets. Where else is he going to go at this point other than the streets? There's no other family. He doesn't know his dad, doesn't know anyone. He's just kicked out into the streets. And I know this happens all around the world, all the time. Oh, can't talk about how much it frustrates me. But it's at 8 years old, what fucking resources do you have to defend yourself? What survival skills have you got at that point? So at 8 years old, Sandro joins a gang. I mean, you know, we all need community, we all need support. Of course, he's going to join a gang. What else is he going to do? Wander about on his own? No. He's going to go look to those other street kids and realise that actually these are kids who are in a similar position or who are also have been fucked by a system. So, you know, he's gonna become friends with them. So he's now and I hate the term, I hate it, street kid. He's now a street kid living in the middle of Rio de Janeiro. So he's living rough, he's surviving, he's doing the best he can to get whatever food he can find. And there's so much around this that's like about actually the mentality for a street kid, for someone who's having to survive like that, just becomes about making your way through the day. So you're not thinking beyond, you're just thinking, I need to make my way through this particular day that I'm in right now. And that's going to become important in Sandro's story. Sandro grows up and he's in and out of trouble and he's picked up by police sometimes for robbery, for a bit of theft here and there, for stealing food, stealing money. Sometimes him and his gang of friends, they would just squat in an empty property, but then of course they would be moved on, police would come along, move them on. So we're going to move to a day in Sandro's life, and it's going to be the biggest day in his life. He's 22 years old, and it's the year 2000. What Sandro was going to do on that day would become worldwide news. It would become the biggest news event that had ever happened in Rio de Janeiro, and it would become the biggest thing that police had ever had to deal with. So Sandro's living in Copacabana, which sounds lovely. Makes you think of the that shit, really camp Barry Manilow at the Copa. But there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of sadness in Copacabana as well. Now, him and the gang, the street kids gang, they'd come to Copacabana really because, well, there's a lot of tourism there, because it is actually a nice bit of Rio de Janeiro. I say that as if I've ever been. I've not been. But, you know, it's a tourist attraction. It's a place to go. And when there's tourists there, what it means is these kids who are begging on the streets, they're going to get more money, they're going to get more food, so they've moved to Copacabana. Sandro, at 9 a.m. in the morning, boards a city bus, and he's armed with a gun. And his intention is to rob the 11 passengers on that bus. The bus is on a really busy street. There's traffic everywhere. It's pedestrians everywhere. It's right in the heart, the very centre of Copacabana, and it's broad daylight. So when he boards that bus and he has that gun, the bus stops. People wonder, why has the bus just stopped? And from the outside, they can see in very clearly to the bus. Okay, there's a man waving a gun around on that bus. So immediately, police are called. Police arrive immediately at the situation. And what they see straight away is complete chaos, because you've got this bus sitting in the middle of a street. There's a man on the bus, he has a gun, he is attempting to rob everyone on that bus, but you've also just still got people walking around all over the place, cars still flying around all over the street. But what they don't do, and this is the first of many fuck-ups that you're going to find here, they don't isolate the area. They just allow people to still keep driving around the area and people to still keep walking up and down the streets. So that is mistake number one. But there is now a police presence in the area next to the bus. Sandro gets the passengers to open all their bags so that he can see what's in them. And in one of the bags he sees a towel from one of the passengers. He takes it and he wraps it around his face. His next move is to take one of the female passengers on the bus. He holds a gun to her head, marches her down to the driver's seat. Now the driver had, as soon as Sandro entered the bus, jumped out the window. So he was gone. The driver was away. He takes this female passenger. He says to her, with a gun held to her head, drive this bus. Get this bus moving now. Let's get out of here. And she's petrified, of course. She's absolutely petrified. So, because police haven't isolated the area, there is potentially a clear path for the bus to be able to move. However, She's so scared, she's so terrified with this gun pointed to her head that she's struggling to get the engine going. She's struggling to make the bus move. As well as the arrival of the police at this time, local media arrived, and very quickly they were filming this situation. So there's a photographer, and he is standing right in front of the bus. So if this bus gets moving, this photographer will get run over. Sandro is shouting at the female with a gun pointed to her head, "Drive this bus." She doesn't get the bus moving. He goes to the window and he shouts out to the police, "Get him," talking about the photographer, "get him out of the way or I will run him over." Do police get the photographer out of the way? Do they fuck? He just stays there. Ugh. So, a shot is fired from Sandro's gun. Now, this shot went through one of the windows on the bus. It didn't hit anyone, but it was a warning shot. It was a warning shot from Sandro that he meant business. He was not messing around. So the situation, it's building. It's becoming way more serious than police first thought it was. And the police commander arrives. He arrives on the scene and he immediately starts to communicate with all of the police that are now surrounding the bus. And he's communicating with them about strategies, plans. What are they going to do? How are they going to save these people on the bus? How are they going to get them off? How are they going to make sure that nobody dies in this situation? Inside the bus, Sandro is waving a gun around and he's saying to the hostages, "I will kill you. I have no problem with killing you all right now." He then also, random moments, starts to just break into song, which is quite odd. Must have been quite strange to go from someone pointing a gun at you and saying, "I will kill you," into them bursting into song. Odd. By this point, police have called negotiators, snipers, psychologists, every available police person in the area is on the scene. They are surrounding this bus. Now the problem here is psychologists didn't really know what they were actually dealing with. They didn't know who Sandro was. They didn't know he was a street kid. They weren't sure if he was just a man who had lost his mind one day and wandered on with a gun. Nobody really was very clear who he was. And that was a mistake. That was a real mistake on their part. Because if they had just tried to communicate at the very early stages with Sandro and just figure out why this was happening beyond this is just a mugging, they may have made this experience less horrific than it is. But they assume at this moment, oh, he's just still a homeless person who's got a hold of a gun, is desperate for money for drugs, and he's gotten onto a bus, and now he's holding everybody on that bus hostage. During my kind of research for this, there becomes a really poignant moment where some of the former street kids who lived in Rio de Janeiro will talk about how actually the way that country treats them is that they are entirely invisible, and that actually what they really are is they're hungry for human existence. They just want to be visible. They don't want to be treated like shit by police anymore. They don't want to be looked down on by people. They just want to actually be recognised that they're kids who are living on the street through circumstance. They're not there through fucking choice. Of course they're not. Some of them are like fucking 6, 7 years old. Of course they're not there by choice. But nobody in this situation is looking at Sandro and going, okay, perhaps he has something he wants to say. And he's not necessarily communicating it very well, but this situation is an opportunity for us to go, okay, we can de-escalate this situation if we can just kind of understand who he is. But that never happened. This is all being filmed by news crews, and it's going out live on TV. In the footage, you can hear Sandro shouting, "I'm going to shoot, and I'm going to do her first," and he's pointing at one of the female hostages. So this is the scene. The bus is entirely surrounded by the SWAT team. Hundreds of police are around the bit of the street where the bus has stopped in case Sandro attempts to flee. Crowds have gathered at this point on the streets to watch this. TV and news crews everywhere. There's helicopters up above, there's reporters, journalists, photographers, they're all there, they're all watching it. Those 11 people inside of that bus, man, they must have been fucking terrified. By now, it's gone way beyond a robbery situation. Sandro has created a hostage situation on a public bus. Cameras can see right into the bus, and Sandro's holding one of the male passengers around the neck and holding a gun to his head. Some people on the bus, they manage to hide at the back. They're crouched under seats and they don't know if Sandro can see them or if Sandro knows that they're there. Outside the bus, police and the SWAT team, they're not overly worried. They've been to stick up, as they call it. Stick up situations before, and it's always been resolved. Now there's a term that the police use called interrupted robbery. And this is what they kind of think they're dealing with. They think that they're just dealing with, this is a robbery. It's just got a little bit out of hand. And in these situations, sometimes what police will do is they'll allow the robber to escape. Which to me sounds fucking crazy. When I was going through this research, I was like, let the robber escape. What the hell are you even talking about? But the logic there is, as I understand it, that actually if you let the robber escape, if you facilitate them getting away from the scene, you're saving everybody who's at the scene. You're saving all those people from potentially being harmed. So one of the hostages, right, she's sitting quite casually on the bus. Well, not casually, she's obviously fucking terrified. But she's shouting out to police, get him a cab, give him money, give him whatever he wants, and just get him out of here. But do police do that? No. They feel confident they can handle this. Police are assuming that Sandro's going to walk off the bus with his hands up at any moment because, well, he's now got no chance of escaping. And also, he hasn't made any demands. No demands for money or an escape route or weapons. So far, no demands. And he hasn't been able to get this bus moving, so he knows he's stuck. Police negotiators are asking Sandro to let the hostages go. Let them off the bus. And this conversation, it's so weird. He walks over to one of the male hostages, and it's a young guy, about 21 years old, and he looks at the guy and he sees that he has a rucksack. And he says, "What about you? Are you a student?" And the hostage says, "Yes." Sandro says, "Well, you better get going then, otherwise you'll be late for school." So this hostage is allowed to walk off the bus. And Sandro says, when you get off, you close that door from the outside, because I don't want anyone else getting on this bus. And so off he goes. He's the first hostage to be allowed off. So negotiators are starting to think, okay, right, so he's willing to let people out of the situation. Sandro, over the next couple of hours, will allow a few more hostages here and there off of the bus. Sometimes he helps push them through a window out onto the street. Sometimes they're allowed to go out through the front door. Sandro lets all but 3 females off of the bus. Let's talk about 2 of the females that Sandro keeps hostage on that bus. The first is Giza. Giza was a 21-year-old primary school teacher, and on that day she was on her way to work. That's why she'd boarded the bus. And the second is Jananis. Now, Jananis will become really important to how this story plays out. So with the females left on the bus, he demands that they empty their purses and they give him their money, anything valuable that they might have. And as they're emptying their bag, he sees lipstick falling out of their purse. Don't worry, this isn't going to go into he starts putting on lipstick and it all goes a bit weird. This is what he does with the lipstick. He marches Janinas to the front of the bus, and with a gun held to her head, he demands that she write a message that he will dictate on the front window of the bus. And she writes a message, and it says this: "He is going to kill us all at 6 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon when this message in lipstick goes up. Right, so now police are thinking, oh, fuck, what have we got here? He's letting some go. He's being reasonable. In some ways, he's letting people off that bus. But now he's got these 3 women on this bus, and he's saying everyone else who's left, they're going to be dead at 6 o'clock. And this entire thing by now is being live streamed around the world on news channels. This is not, I'm not going to lie, it's not the finest moment for the Rio de Janeiro police. They're really starting to look like a bunch of monkeys. They're starting to look like they really don't know what they're doing in this situation. The reason I mentioned the TV is that this was really important to Sandro. It was important that now, what had happened since the minute he boarded that bus in the morning until the point where he had let some go but was left with 3 on the bus, he had become really visible. He was in charge of this story and he knew it. He absolutely knew it. You can say, yes, Sandro couldn't read or couldn't write. That didn't matter. That did not matter one little bit. He was looking out of that bus. He was seeing the amount of news that he was attracting. He was seeing the amount of media that were there, and he was using it. And as as an opportunity to be the leading character in this story. So the hostages on the bus, instructed by Sandro, they were using every piece of lipstick that they could find to write messages on the bus windows for the outside world to read. They were writing things like, "He is crazy. He is going to kill me." So he then opens one of the bus windows and he has the girl who originally wrote the message in lipstick, Janice, and he has his arm around her neck and a gun pointed at her head. The police, they approach the window, not sure what he's going to do. A cameraman filming this approaches Sandro, and Sandro goes into a loud tirade at the police and the camera. He says, "At 6 p.m, this one will have her head blown off. You can't fucking terrorise me anymore. 15 years ago, I watched my mother die, and you won't terrorise me anymore, you fucking pigs. Unless I get a rifle and a grenade, this shit is going to get scary. I'm not fucking with you here. At 6 o'clock, she is the first to die if I don't get it." He then drags her away and he closes the window. The look in her eyes is haunting. It's so terrifying. Of course she would be. I mean, that's the understatement of the year, but she's fucking petrified. During his rant, he keeps mentioning canalibria. Canalibria is a word that he just keeps saying over and over. It's being picked up by the cameras. The media are hearing this word, canalibria, canalibria, canalibria. What is this? What is this that he's saying? I'll tell you exactly what that is. When Sandro was 15, he was part of a street gang. It was a big gang. It had 60 odd members from all ages, 8 up to age 19. Now the gang would sleep on the steps of a church in Rio de Janeiro, and police would come every night and they would threaten to harm the gang if they didn't move. But the gang didn't go anywhere, they just stayed where they were. They acted as a unit. They would steal during the days, and at night, this gang of kids, they would put all their money together and they would use it to buy as much food as possible, and they'd sit on the steps of the church and they'd eat fries, burgers, milkshakes, ice cream, anything that they could buy with their money. But the threats from police to the gang were increasing all the time. They say police were now threatening to murder some gang members if they wouldn't move on from the steps of the church. But the kids were like, yeah, whatever. We're a big gang. And really, that's just empty threats from the police. So one night as the kids are asleep on the steps of the church, 2 cars appear. Some of the kids wake up and with curiosity they go towards the car, and out of nowhere shots are being fired at the gang. 7 kids lay dead on the street from these shots. Gang members ran to safety down alleyways, they hid inside bins. Sandro, being one of those kids, he survived. He managed to run really far away from where the shots were being fired. So when he is shouting out of that bus at police, that's what he's referring to. He's saying, you came and you massacred my friends, my only family, and I will not be terrorised anymore by you. Now the police, it was never proved that the police ever fired these shots, but it's one of those, I don't want to get into a murky area here of difficult stuff, but it's one of those, everyone knows it was the police. There was a big thing at the time about cleaning up the street kids, get rid of them, get them off the streets. And so everyone knows really it was the police that did it, but it's never actually been proven. Anyway, back on the bus at this moment. Sandro is now talking as much as he can to the cameras and to the police from inside the bus. Still with the hostages close to him and waving the gun around. He brings Jananis to the front and he says to the camera with a gun held to her head, she is going to die at 6 o'clock. One of the female passengers on the bus during, must just be the most horrible moment. She's pleading for her life. She says to Sandro, I have a heart problem and I need medication. And so at some of the moments when he's talking to the cameras, he says to police, this one with a heart problem is going to die soon if you don't get me what I want. He's upped at this point what he wants. He now wants 2 grenades and 2 guns. So you've now got the 3 hostages on the bus, and it's now 5 o'clock. And it's starting to get dark, and at 6 o'clock, the big event is going to happen, according to Sandro. He brings Jananis with the heart problems to the window and he starts shouting to everyone, look at her, look at her. And her mouth, right? Her mouth has begun to droop. And it's like she's either having a stroke or her heart has become really weak or she's having, I don't know what's happening. And he keeps shouting, I'm not fucking around here anymore. So police are thinking, what are they going to do at this point? And this is good to know. This is good knowledge to have. What are police options at this point? Well, a sniper is one option. Snipers had been positioned all around the area, high up in buildings, hidden in parks. So a sniper's one option. Another option is a complete attack by police. They could organise a hostage takeover, get on that bus and deal with it that way. The other is negotiation. Now, he had negotiated the release of quite a few of the people, but now this has escalated into something much, much more. There's no way that he was going to let anyone else off that bus. This is really disappointing, but at the time, police in Rio de Janeiro, there was hundreds of them surrounding that bus, but they had no way to communicate with each other than some hand signals here and there. There was no system in place. They didn't have walkie-talkies. They didn't have earpieces. They didn't have those things that they could communicate with each other. So it's kind of, it's a bit of a blind leading the blind situation here, because nobody really knows what that police team over there are thinking and planning. And even though the commander is there, he's struggling to go, what's the best option here? What the fuck can I do in this moment? And people who are watching this, A, on TV, but B, there in the street, are going, why are the police not doing more? Why has a decision not been made about how to deal with this situation? So there's a point, right, where Sandro puts his arm out of the window of the bus and he has the gun, right, in his hand, and his arm is out of the bus for about 20 seconds. So he's kind of waving the gun at the crowd. Now, it would have taken seconds for a sniper who was positioned to shoot Sandro's arm, disarm him entirely of that gun. But did it happen? No, it fucking didn't. A call comes to the police commander from the government. And it's the highest form of government position in Rio de Janeiro, with a very clear instruction. And the instruction is, he must come out of that bus alive. And so police, they take this as their official orders. Who made that decision? I don't know. But someone from up on high, way above the police, said, make sure he comes out of that bus alive. Inside the bus, the hostages, they say to Sandro, why don't you take us out of here in a circle? Like, we can surround you and they can't shoot you at that point. And he says, no. Now, Giza, one of the female hostages, she has a conversation with Sandro and she starts to say, look, I know what you're going through. And he says, no, you fucking don't. She explains that actually she does. She grew up in a troubled life. And yeah, she got out of it and she made things better. But something changes in Sandro at this point. He actually starts to have a conversation with Giza. He starts to be open and honest with her. By now it's 5:30. It's half an hour from when Sandro says a hostage will die. At 6 o'clock, he takes Janina and he starts to walk her. It's just bizarre. He starts to walk her up and down the bus. He tells her, when I get to the number 100, you are going to be shot. So he starts 1, 2, 3, and then he jumps. He jumps to number 50. And then he goes back to number 5, 6, 7, 80. He's fucking with her. He's just playing around with these numbers. He says to Giza, open the window and start shouting he's going to kill her. And now, up to this point, it's all threats from Sandro. It's all big talk. It's all, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's all waving your gun around. I've got this. I've got this. But Sandro had said, I am not fucking about. He opens the window and he says, I told you by 6 o'clock I wanted 2 grenades and 2 rifles, and you thought I wasn't serious. He holds Giza's head out of the window. He points the gun at her head. He pulls the gun back inside. He points the gun at one of the other hostages, and a shot is fired. Police and crowds and people watching this live have just witnessed Sandro shoot a bullet inside of that bus. From inside the bus, there's just screaming. There's just hysterical, crazy fucking amounts of screaming. So, police, do they use a sniper? No. Police, do they get on that bus? No. There are police officers with guns, positioned perfectly to shoot Sandro. Do they do it? No. So Giza is screaming at the police. She's screaming out the window. For Christ's sake, he's just shot someone. And they say to her, and this is ludicrous, this is fucking ludicrous, they actually say the words, keep calm. She loses the plot. I get her. I feel her. I would fucking lose the plot at that point. She shouts back, keep calm. For fuck's sake, you're not the one with a gun pointed at your head. An officer from outside, watching this whole thing unfold, goes to the commander and he says, I don't think he's shot anyone. I think this is a bluff. I think he's put that girl on the floor, but he hasn't shot her. But you've got then contradictory information. You've got Giza shouting out of the window, she's bleeding. For fuck's sake, she is bleeding. Do something. But in fact, the officer was right. Sandro had told Janina to lie on the floor, and he said to her, I'm going to shoot at the floor, but I'm not going to kill you. He then said to the rest of the hostages, scream, act like I have just shot someone. His exact instruction to them was to act like there was a dead body on the floor. But, and remember this, outside of the bus, nobody knows that. They're all assuming that he's now shot one of the hostages. Sandro's actually, I hate to use the phrase doing well, but he's actually doing really well here with parallel dialogues, because he's having one conversation with the three women on the bus and an entirely separate conversation with the police and the cameras outside. So outside, to the world, it looks like he shot one of the hostages and that he's ready to shoot the next two. He demands now to speak to the commander. So the commander comes close to the bus, and Sandro says to him, so you're scared now, aren't you? You think it's okay to beat up and shoot little kids who live on the street? Well, now you're scared. I'm in fucking control of this situation and you are scared. He then says, when are you going to stop killing kids and terrorising street kids? Or am I going to have to kill everyone on this bus before it stops? The commander tries to have a conversation with Sandro, but Sandro is he's in that place where he just wants to rant. He's angry. He's not willing to listen. He just wants to say what he has to say at that moment. In his next speech to camera, he says to police, while he holds a gun to Giza's head, this is because you think you're the fucking hero. This is because you're willing to let a pretty girl die. This is because you have no respect for the life of a Brazilian. You would rather she dies than lose face. I will shoot again, and this is because you police officers, you pigs, want to fuck around with me. I'm not fucking around here. She will be dead next. Oh my god. So what he starts doing now is he starts walking Giza back up and down the bus. And at one point she kneels in front of him and he points the gun at her head. Outside, the crowd in the street watching this are shouting at the police, kill him. Why are you not shooting him? Kill him. He starts dragging her around the bus by her hair and by her throat. Now, inside the bus, he's orchestrating this situation. The hostages aren't dead, but from the outside, it looks like he's going to kill them. And he's trying to force the police into a position. He makes her stand up and scream out the window. He's just told me he's going to shoot me in 60 seconds. What are the police doing? They're still watching the situation. They're watching it. They're not fucking acting. sitting. They're just watching the situation. Sandro goes to the front of the bus. He leaves the 3 hostages at the back, and the negotiators use this chance to approach the window, and where one of the hostages sit, they whisper advice to her. They say, be his friend. Be nice to him. Ask him about his life. Show him you're not the enemy. So she goes to the front and she starts to ask him about his family, and well, he starts conversation. He mentions his mother was killed in front of him and that he had a sister, but he was never sure if his sister ever survived the streets. They start to talk and they start to bond. She goes back to the back of the bus, and this time negotiators slip her a necklace, and it has the Virgin Mary on it. They say, go and put it around his neck and ask him about God. So she does this, and he starts to, again, open up to her. He says, yeah, he believes in God. He has no faith in the police, but he believes in God. They say to her, right, okay, you are doing really well here. Now get him talking and tell him that actually he is the biggest victim in this situation. Be sympathetic to him. And she does this, and it kind of works. He realises she's right. The next and final part of this is where it's going to reach its absolute height. Sandro takes Giza with a gun pointed towards her head, and he walks towards the front of the bus, and he opens the door. And with her in front of him, they leave the bus. And he is shouting, don't shoot, or I will blow her brains out. Now at this moment, this situation, there are so many ways that it could have gone. But here's what happens. Within a second of him being off that bus with a hostage in front of him, fucking chaos erupts. Shots are fired everywhere. He's screaming, son of a bitch, at the top of his voice. People are running everywhere, and it is complete carnage. Hundreds of people are running in different directions. If we look at the moment in detail, in slow motion, Sandro steps off the bus with Giza. The immediate police response is to shoot at Sandro. A shot is fired into his leg and he falls to the ground. Now as he falls, he takes Giza with him, and his gun goes off and he shoots her, and her body slumps to the ground. Giza is shot a total of 4 times. 3 shots by Sandro and 1 shot in the face by police. Police jump on Sandro and they get the gun from his hand. Giza lies next to him, slumped over and bleeding. There's over 1,000 people on the streets, and it's just erupted into complete madness. Guns are going off everywhere. People are running around screaming their heads off. The crowds are chanting at police, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him. But Sandro, although he's taken a couple of police shots, he isn't dead, and he's taken into the back of a police van. I mean, it's a miracle at this moment that police can actually get him to the van with the amount of people that are in the way. Giza's body is picked up and taken to the hospital. She dies before she even arrives at the hospital. Inside the police van, Sandro begins to kick the glass and he breaks the windows of the police car. He bites officers viciously and he breaks one officer's arm. They get this, they hold him down. They cover his face with a blanket to make him faint. They want him passed out. They want him in a position where they can just move his body. The blanket over his face does more than make him faint. With two officers holding a blanket over his face, Sandro dies in the back of the police van. He dies of asphyxiation. So, in simple terms, they did what they were told. They got Sandro alive out of that bus, and then they killed him. The officers travelling with Sandro, who placed the blanket over his face, were charged with murder, but a jury finds them not guilty. Those officers, to this day, still work for the Rio de Janeiro police. Okay, whose story is this? That's always a focus for me whenever I start any story. I have to know immediately, whose story am I telling? How do I feel about the person who's the centre of this story? Do I care? Are they a villain? Are they a victim? Are they whoever? Is this the story of a boy who never stood a chance in the world because of what he was born into? Is this the story of Giza, who was on her way to work in a primary school that day and ended up dead? Is it the story of 11 people who got on a bus going about their lives and faced a fucking horrific situation? Or is it the story of real police failings in Rio de Janeiro? I think Sandro, to this day, stands as an example of so many failings in the system. And so ends the story. Okay, dark, I know. Horrible but important to tell. Well, yeah, I feel a bit bummed out by that story, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I live in Glasgow, I've had some absolutely terrible experiences on buses. I mean, obviously nothing like that, but yeah, about a year ago, right, I was coming home on probably a Friday night, Saturday night or something like that. I'd been out with some friends. I was coming home on a Friday night, I was on the late bus, right, and the late bus is never a good place to be, I can assure you. So I did that really stupid thing, which I should know better than. I positioned myself at the back of the bus, right, the very back of the bus, which just means, you know, you're putting yourself already in a stupid position. So there I am at the back of the bus, I've got my headphones on, I'm like, listening to my music, having a lovely time, this is great, this is fine, and this guy gets on who, he's kind of staggering about, looks a bit kind of like, doesn't really know what's going on, his clothes are covered in stains, he's a bit kind of dishevelled looking, and I see him walking towards the back of the bus, and I'm thinking, oh fuck, don't come and sit next to me, and of course, where does he sit? Right next to me. And he's like, excuse me mate, have you got a fag? Now a fag meaning in Britain, meaning do you have a cigarette, not are you a fag, but do you have a fag? I'm like, yeah. Okay, so I go into my pocket to get cigarettes, and I'm like, I give him one, and I said to him, well, you can't actually really smoke on a bus, and he went, don't worry mate, I can get away with it. I was like, why are you the exception to getting away with cigarettes? I don't know, but apparently he thought he was. So there he is, he's trying to light this cigarette, and he can't light his fag. He's like out his face, right? To be honest, it's like his head's lolling all over the place, right? So I light his cigarette for him. And he takes out from his bag, a can of Tennent's, which is really cheap Scottish lager. And he's trying his very best to open this can of Tennent's. And he breaks the ring pulley bit off of it. So then he just hands me the can, and he's like, open it. Okay, right? So we're now at this point, everyone on the bus is looking around okay, what's going on at the back? There's a man smoking a cigarette. There's some situation growing at the back. So it ended up with me having to take my keys out of my jacket and punch through the top of the can to be able, because he was quite insistent, open it. And I was like, right, okay, fine, fucking calm down, mate. Do you know, he's one of those ones where it's a bit this could actually be potentially okay, or you could turn on me in a fucking second. So you just have to kind of play along with the situation and just judge it as best you possibly can. So I pierced the top of the can. I'm like, right, it's okay. So give him the can. So he's got his can, he's got his fag, he's totally fine. So then now he wants to open up, right? So now, I've said it a million times, and of course, well, we wouldn't be here if this wasn't the truth. I love a story. So he starts telling me the story. He's just out of prison. He's out of prison for a stabbing. Now, he didn't actually stab the guy. It was actually his brother, but he took the fall for it. So this is him. He's on this bus because he's going to his brother to get revenge for the stabbing that he didn't actually do. I'm like, right, this is excellent. So the bus driver, right, now, I don't know. I don't know if maybe I think a bus driver should be equipped to do more than this. Knowing all of this is going on, being able to hear it from the back of the bus driver stops the bus, and he is looking in his mirror right up to the back, and I think, oh, right, okay, he's going to come up the back and say, you need to put your fag out, you can't drink on a bus, do whatever. But the bus driver just watches the situation for a minute, but doesn't do anything, and then he just kind of drives on. I'm like, okay. Now I've got around, there's a couple of people in front who are turning their heads around, and they're mouthing at me are you okay? And I'm like, well, I don't know what else. I'm nodding along, yeah, I'm totally fine. Yeah, I'm thinking, well, what else do you want me to do in this situation? Anyway, he carries on. He drinks his can, smokes his fag, and then he's like, oh, right, this is my stop, mate. Right, see you later. Shakes my hand, all that, right, okay. Oh, see you later. Off the bus. Now, as soon as he gets off the bus, everyone turns around to me and they're like, oh, God, that was horrible. Oh, that was a terrible time for you. Oh, my God, that must be... I'm like, yeah, but where were you all when it was happening? You all just sat and pretended you couldn't fucking hear it. Do you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I've been in a million fucking situations in my life where I've had a person who could potentially turn dangerous, or a person who could potentially cause me a problem, and I can always get myself out of it. Not to be, I may play the soft, gentle, sweet person, but I'm not to be fucked with, so I can get myself out of it. But it's just that moment where you go, well, actually, do you know what? If that had escalated, would any of those people have actually jumped in? I don't really think so, because that bus driver was like, there's a situation going on at the back, but I'm just going to not really do anything about it. People on the bus, yeah, you weren't really willing to do anything either. You just wanted to listen to it and then congratulate me for getting through it at the end. Okay, I know it's nowhere near the same as what those horrific people went through. Of course not. But I'm just saying, it's an interesting thing. And I also felt I just wanted to tell you something that maybe wasn't as dark as hostages on a bus. Alright, okay, I've rambled enough. I am out of here. So, please, if you would like to go to the British Podcast Awards and vote for me in the Listener's Choice category, that would be lovely. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's Twitter, and there's Patreon. And until the middle of the week, okay? Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.